Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm speaking to Harriet Ball. Harriet has been in talent acquisition for over 10 years, working at some of the world's most famous brands. These include L'Oreal, Uber, and On Running. She's now joined the world of venture capital and is advising some of the most exciting startups and founders on their early stage hiring over at SuperSeed. This episode is a playbook for early stage hiring. If you're working at a startup organization or would be interested in doing so in the future, or would be interested in going into the VC world as a recruiter, this episode's for you. Let's get into it. Harriet Ball, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Joe. I'm very excited to be here.
I want to ask you about your role because it's quite an interesting recruiting role, right? You work for a VC. First of all, let's talk about what the role actually is, right? Because VCs are famously lean in their headcount. Why would they hire a recruiting person?
Yeah, so it's a really great question. But before I dive in on that, I'll just quickly introduce SuperSeed and our stage and hopefully set a bit of context around that before I tell you a bit about my role. So we are early stage investors into B2B SaaS AI businesses that are disrupting Industry 4.0. So we invest at pre-seed and seed stage, so the earliest stages in your venture life cycle, venture journey as a founder. And we believe it's the earliest stages that kind of set the building blocks for what greatness will look like as you go on to raise further fundraising and you grow your company. So for us, the talent role is really integral as part of that. And as you probably know, like early stage founders spend upwards of 50% of their time on hiring. So for us, it makes total sense to have a talent person dedicated to helping our founders not only identify great talent, but also advise them through the different journeys that you'll face when scaling your company from a people and talent perspective. So my role here is to work with our portfolio company founders and advise them on any and all people and talent related topics as they scale. I also make talent introductions to them for maybe senior hires or advisors or non-exec directors, alongside also running sometimes end-to-end recruitment processes for those niche or really highly critical hires that they need to make as part of their growth journey. So if you think about the value of that to a founder, to have somebody who you can go to and you can ask questions to, who have kind of like been there, done it, seen it from multiple different types of businesses, both big conglomerates and then smaller early stage startups, and help together build the building blocks of what great scalable talent process will look like at the earliest stage. So my role, I say a co-pilot to our founders when it comes to hiring. So yeah, that's kind of what my role is in a nutshell, but I think it's justified just because of the value that talent has in a startup and the value that talent has to founders. Talent can transform your business for the better or for the worse. And one significant hire can essentially either make or break your startup. So and when you factor in that 9 out of 10 startups fail, which is obviously a huge percentage, and probably a significant percentage of that failure can be down to not having the right team in place. So talent can unlock new markets for you. It can determine the type of talent you'll ultimately then hire, as everything from your first 5 to 10 hires is downstream from those first hires that you make. So they'll help you define your culture, the values that you're creating, and also set the bar for the rest of the hires that you then go on to make. So the value of talent in a startup is insane. And to be able to have someone who can be a co-pilot to you and go through this journey with you and also make great introductions, we feel is of significant value and therefore can justify the headcount of for having a talent person.
Yeah, makes total sense, right? When you think about what VCs are doing, like the difference between writing a check and leaving a founder to it versus writing a check and then really supporting that founder in that growth journey they're going to go on makes a lot of sense. There'll be a number of recruiters listening to this. They might be working for a tech company or a different internal role, or maybe they're in a service provider who might be interested in like a talent role at a VC. Yeah. Two parts of this question, like what are the core differences between that internal role and a VC role, and what can someone maybe do to start working towards a VC role in the future?
Yeah, I think the first thing I say is that the roles are completely different. The VC talent role is an advisory position where you are working kind of with the founder, someone who's got a number of other things that they're doing on their plate at the same time, and under a lot of pressure to deliver the investment that the investors have made back in their startup. And so number one, the pressure is significantly on when you're kind of working in an investment perspective versus maybe in an in-house role where if you're in a bigger team, you're potentially cushioned a little bit from that stress, I guess, at the higher levels. In terms of how to kind of set yourself up as an in-house recruiter, if you're looking or wanting to get into a VC role, I will be totally honest, when I first moved into this VC role, I kind of went in all eyes wide open and wasn't really knowing like what to expect or like how I could have set myself up for success better in my in-house career. But one of the couple of things that I think really do help is one, having a complete and total business understanding as an in-house recruiter. I think often in bigger teams or in larger organizations, you're typically one of many recruiters and you'll focus in on one part of the business and you deeply understand that part of the business, which of course is insanely valuable, especially when it comes to knowing like what greatness looks like for that part of the business and really kind of specializing in on one specific area that you need to nail. But knowing like how that part of the business affects the rest of the company that you're within, I think can really kind of create a context of, okay, this is how this plays a part in the overall success of the business. So having that total business understanding, and it's something that we would always do in my in-house career, is share knowledge amongst the team around what was going on in different parts of the business, because ultimately they do all impact each other at the end of the day. So that's one thing I definitely would recommend. Two, I think, is being able to have empathy for the senior leadership team and empathy for the senior leaders within the organization and trying to kind of see things from a different perspective. So often in my in-house career, you also, you need to fill the role, you want to get it done so you can move on to something else. Or if there's a particularly challenging position, you can, on one hand, really want to get the role filled, and then the other hand, want to find them the right talent, but knowing like what that means to the person you're recruiting the role into, and then as a byproduct, what their boss, how this role can impact like the entire chain upwards across the business. And knowing that these senior leaders across the business, they have multiple other things going on at the same time, and hiring is just a part of their role, and building their team is just a part of their role. So kind of seeing things from a different perspective, I think, would set you up very nicely to working with founders who, again, are super stretched across what they're trying to deliver upon on a daily basis, and being able to kind of understand the empathy and have that understanding from their perspective. The third thing I'd say is thinking about hiring as investing, or a byproduct, making a very commercially driven hiring decisions. So when you're an investor, you're obviously investing in a founder and you're giving them that equity or that cash to then scale their business. So when you're thinking from an in-house perspective of of how hiring kind of impacts like the revenue of an organization, rather than just filling a seat, and thinking like, okay, what is the desired outcome that this hire will achieve? How will this hire impact the revenue or the runway of the business that I'm within now? What kind of growth will they unlock? And trying to think more commercially around hiring, rather than we need somebody because the team is stretched or whatever that means. Just kind of looking at from more of a commercial impact, and what is the commercial impact of either not hiring this role or hiring this role, and how can it grow the business further? So I think that's one thing I've really doubled down on from moving into VC, is it's all about the commercials and whether this is a good investment or not. Another thing I'd say is in VC and in this role, you're often working with multiple different founders within multiple different businesses on multiple different roles, and there's different topics that pop up constantly. The ability to topic change and context switch quite easily. And then also, the last thing I'd say is knowing how to advise and how to steer without kind of telling people what to do. For me, at least, I think that's something I'm still working on and trying to like find the way that I want to advise. But often in the in-house role, I found that it's making that shift in your mind from being like, okay, we're executing because this is what the business needs, or we're pushing back on this hiring manager because their expectations are not aligned to reality sometimes. But being an advisor is slightly different, and learning how to be an advisor based on the experiences that you have, and kind of give them information in a way that they can choose what they want to do with that information, but help steer them in the right direction. without telling them what to do, I think is everything. And then I think the last thing I'd say is talent pooling, networking and relationship building with candidates for the long run. So one thing in VC is it's all about the talent network. It's like, who do you know? How can they add value to this business? Who do they then know? And knowing, for example, if you've made an investment in a company and you know in 6 months to 12 months time, they're going to be expanding into the US, but you already know that business very well and you know potentially what the future role profiles or their future hires could look like in a different market, then stacking up your network to fill it with people who are experts within that space, who have done the US market before, who know what they're going to be doing out there, and really building those relationships for the long run. And I find sometimes in an in-house role, when you've got like 15 recs that you're working on, it can be very easy to be quite transactional when it comes to working with candidates. But in VC and working with founders, being able to represent that founder in that business I think is quite a personal thing, especially in the early stage, and ensuring that you're, even if the candidate's not the right fit, giving them a great experience when they're meeting with you and they truly understand like what this company is trying to build, and knowing that it may not be the right fit for right now, but in the future there could be something here. So nurturing those relationships over a period of time and always thinking about the future state of the business. So those are some of the things that I'd say.
Yeah, it sounds like a super interesting role. The main thing I took from what you're saying there is how it effectively combines like the hardest things from both agency and internal, right? From agency, you've got the context switching, you've got lots of different clients that you need to understand and move between. And then internally, you need to be more of a sort of consultative business partner to maybe your hiring manager, and in this case, founders. Let's talk about that a little bit more then. So I'm going to throw a scenario at you. Let's say I'm an early stage founder and I'm looking to hire my first salesperson. What would you say to me? Where should we start?
Okay, so first thing I want you to do as an early stage founder is you need to define exactly why you need this person. You need to decide, are you ready to hire this person? And then also figure out if you know that you're ready to hire this person. So timing is everything in recruitment. We all know this, but knowing not to go too early or look too late. It's kind of like a certain inflection point. I feel that you need to be ready to be able to pass on those founder-led sales. And it is only once you've cracked founder-led sales that you should be in a position to think, okay, this is really starting to scale now. Now is when I need to actually have someone start. But you can start looking for someone early on, and not leaving things too late, I think is quite important too, making sure that like the timing of when you're going to need somebody. And for example, how do you know you're ready to hire somebody and pass on that founder-led sales? Well, for example, have you found product market fit? Because if you haven't, and you're just not comfortable selling as a founder, and you want someone to take it off your hands, I think is not the right approach. I think as a founder, you need to know how to sell your own products, and you need to be able to do that successfully to prove that you have product market fit. And then should you need to bring somebody in, for example, if your sales cycles are getting more complicated or they're getting longer, and you need someone with specific expertise that can help you with that inflection point, then that's when it's a good time to start thinking about bringing on a sales hire. Or for example, if you need a specialist skill set adding to the team that can help take the sales to the next level, and you're really starting to scale and see a lot of traction coming in. If you need specific industry expertise, if you need specific network expertise, just knowing exactly what it is, why it is that you need this person to come in, and like essentially, are you ready for it? Because the worst thing would be bringing somebody in who's super expensive when you're not ready to actually pass on founder-led sales, or leaving it too late and then having to wait potentially even 6 months for that person to start based on notice periods, the time it will take you to find somebody, and then also factoring in how long it will actually take for that person to have an impact in your business. So trying to think longer term than potentially you're thinking right now.
Just to jump in there, Harriet, what would you ask a founder to make sure they are actually ready to hire? Because that might not be a conversation people are used to having.
Yeah, I think it's kind of just understanding where they're at in terms of their revenue growth, the number of kind of accounts and sales that they're managing at any one time, their time allotment and how much time they're dedicating to sales specifically versus kind of pulling them away from other parts of the business, their kind of energy and their motivation to keep doing things. And I think that, in early stage, founders should always be involved in the sales cycle at some point. But if you're getting to a point where you need to your time is being pulled away from other parts of the business and other parts of building your company, because obviously it's not all just about sales. Like, as much as that is a very important part of to get right, like, there are a lot of other departments kind of happening in a lot of other growth areas that you need to focus on. So knowing how much time and how much output they're getting from the time that they're putting into sales, and whether or not they are in a point where they've got too many leads coming in, which is obviously a great point to position to be in. And that's when you know that you need to have a sales mechanism in place. Or is it getting too complicated? Are they, for example, they've done SMB or they've done mid-market quite well themselves, and now their real ICP is in the enterprise space? They can kind of get to a point where they're comfortable selling to enterprise. They need to bring in that expertise, somebody who's got that network. Like, is that something that's going to be a value add to your sales team? Somebody who's already got an existing and proven network within the space that you're looking to sell into, that will kind of save you like hours of your time trying to build relationships from zero. Yeah, I to be honest, I think from the top of my head, that would be the key things that I'd look for. So how do they know they found product market fit? Are they consistently bringing in new leads? Is their time stretched too much that they need to take a step back, not completely remove, but take a step back and let somebody come in with expertise who has the experience to scale sales, not just kind of do the end-to-end sales now, but be able to scale sales and bring in talent for the future and set you up for success as your business starts to grow and to scale, and to kind of assess the time input into the time that they're putting into sales and the output they're getting out of that, and kind of find that perfect inflection point, which I know is hard to define, but there is a point where it's ready to go.
Perfect. And then after you've invested that extra time up front to make sure they're ready to hire, does it then fall into a more sort of classical recruitment cycle of defining the profile, moving on from there?
Yeah, I mean, every VC is different in terms of the support that they give to their founders. At SuperSeed, we do run end-to-end searches for those, particularly in those first commercial hires or their first significant sales hire in a new market, or when they're ready to, as I said, hit that inflection point. So so for me, for how I run my process is then a typical kind of recruitment process. So do a deep discovery into what exactly it is that they need. So some of my experience working with founders so far, particularly if they haven't necessarily recruited this specific type of profile before, is they kind of tell you like, I need to solve this problem. And then from that, we determine exactly what that role profile will look like and kind of work with them to build that out specifically. So say, for example, the problem is that they're starting to look at enterprise sales, or they think that that's going to be a really big market for them, but they haven't got the expertise themselves of selling to enterprise sales. Then we know that we need to find somebody who has that experience already. We need to find somebody who's got similar experience in the sales cycles that they deal with the deal sizes they deal with, the customers they're selling to, the stakeholders they're managing. And really help them kind of build a profile, because often I think that's one of the biggest difference working in VC versus working in-house, is that when you're working with a hiring manager in-house, typically they're subject matter expertise and they know exactly what they're looking for, and they have a very clear view of what their team needs and the skills that they need to bring in. Whereas I think sometimes if you're a founder and you maybe not as familiar with the roles that you're hiring for, it's kind of disintegrating exactly what that profile needs to look like and then going out to hire them. And then of course we'd run a typical interview process with them. I like to be quite hands-on with those processes, at least for the senior sales hires, just because it's such an important role to get right, and make sure that we take time to deeply understand the candidate, the business model that they're operating within, exactly what it is that they're selling, who they're selling to, their sales cycles, how they sell, average deal sizes, why they've moved on from past roles, what they're looking for in a new opportunity, how their compensation is structured, the stakeholder groups they sell to, and then ensure that we run a structured interview process and be very kind of critical, getting to know that candidate and really prioritizing digging deep into that candidate's experience and being critically asking yourself, does this experience complement what we're trying to build here, and what they need to do inside one of our portfolio companies based on the portfolio company's market, stage, product, and business model, and try and kind of make sure that we're not being lured in by fancy logos, but we're really kind of being critical and like, does this experience match the experience that we're looking to bring on board here? And then also making sure that we're selling the person back. We're pitching the vision throughout. We're making sure that the role this hire, that person, that they know that the impact that they're going to have in the business, and also ensuring that we spend a lot of time with that candidate in person too, and give them a slick, transparent recruitment process, and ensure that we're pressing throughout the process on how this aligns to their career goals, what they want next, and doubling down on assessing whether they're truly motivated for this role. Because if you think from a candidate's perspective, if they're coming from maybe a more established business, or they're coming from a company that's already gone through that early stage growth period and they were part of the early journey, like, are they ready to do this again? Like, is this really what they want to do? Are they coming into this understanding what the expectations will be on them? And are they aligned to the vision, mission, and strategy, and going to be work well with the founders? They're going to be a great value match or cultural addition to the team. So yeah, I'm kind of trying to encourage the founders, if I can't kind of do all of this by myself, to show like, this is what you should be assessing for with such a significant hire. So even if I'm not able to kind of manage it myself end to end, at least showing them, okay, these are the things that you should be factoring in, and this is what will hopefully reduce the risk of making bad hiring decisions.
Cool. Let's finish off then. I think this would be quite interesting. A lot of recruiters listening to this probably work with hiring managers who struggle to find the time to invest in recruiting. Working with founders is probably even worse, right? Their diaries are probably even more chaotic. What advice do you have for people working with, be it founders, hiring managers who are pretty time poor and like struggling to find a lot of time to work with a recruiter or invest in recruiting generally?
Yeah, I mean, first thing I'd say is if your founder is not giving you time for hiring, then I'd say that's a massive red flag, and they need to kind of understand the impact of hiring, and and do your little pitch on, this is why hiring is so important. And this is why if you don't invest enough time and you haven't got complete lens on the people that you're bringing into your business, then it can cause absolute catastrophe. And I think as an early stage founder, until it gets to a point where you literally cannot do it anymore, I think you should be meeting every single candidate that you're considering offering to move into your business. So if you then take that end goal, and then relay it back to the hiring managers or founders that you're working with in terms and in language that they understand, in terms of the impact that this will have on their business, the impact it can have on the culture, and then as a byproduct, the rest of the people within the organization. And it explains to them like, look, it's one of those things that you have to invest time into, and it's important that you want to invest time into. And if they're not interested in doing that, then I'd have massive red flags. But founders are time poor for sure. So one of the things I've learned is to meet them where they are. So that's WhatsApp, that's Slack, whatever communication method they prefer. I'm a huge WhatsApper. Anyone who's ever messaged me will know I'm obsessed with WhatsApp. So I try and make sure that it's WhatsApp, because to be honest, most of our founders are quite keen on WhatsApp. So it's the easiest place to meet them and be somewhere where they, where they like to be anyway, and then just be there and make it easy for them to get hold of you, and vice versa. Like, I think we're moving away from being very, very email centric as the way that we communicate in general. So I think like meeting them where they are is one of the key things I'd say, and being brief, but being precise and being direct on what it is that you need, and what it is that the impact that this will have if they don't kind of pay attention or whatever. I think is one thing that I would say. So speaking to them in a language that they understand and explaining the impact in a way that they understand, and typically that relates back to the cost of things. So trying to explain like what this, if you're a strange resource for longer, like what cost this will have. If you give a candidate a bad experience, what cost this will have, because obviously, as we all know, we've all had great candidate experiences and we've all had really bad ones, and the ones that we talk about probably the most are the bad ones. So thinking about the impacts of that on the market and other candidates who might experience you, other candidates who might want to interview with you in the future. And then also relating it back to not hitting revenue goals, to impacting your runway. Like, the list goes on. If they're still, after all of that, not interested in hanging out with you and getting to work together in recruitment, then I would be like, well, this clearly isn't a priority, and we'll put it on the back burner, and we'll revisit this at a time when you do have time to commit.
Yeah, I love the idea of hitting them where it hurts, like the runway, their targets for growth.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's probably where they're going to listen to you the most. Love it. Harriet, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Joe. It's been great.